and welcome to the Behind the Beaties podcast. I'm Chris Stocker, your host and the creator of the Life of a Diabetic blog. As someone living with type 1 diabetes, I really do know how much my life is consumed with diabetes, and that's why I created this podcast. I wanted to really get to know the people behind the diabetes, hence the name Behind the Beaties podcast. This is the first episode where I'm just going to introduce myself and let you know what you can expect from this podcast. Hopefully, I have a few ums and uhs in this one, and then we get rid of them going forward. So, as I mentioned, my name is Chris Stocker. I started the Life of a Diabetic blog almost 10 years ago at this time. Actually, over 10 years now. I was way back in 2008. So to give you kind of a quick diagnosis story of me, I'll let you know a little bit about the diabetes side of me. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a 19-year-old freshman in college way back in 2004. So this April will be 15 years with diabetes. I knew nothing about the disease, knew nothing what was wrong with me, but I had every clear symptom, sign, everything. Lost weight, vomiting, going to the bathroom all the time. Didn't know until I went to the emergency room. So once I was diagnosed with diabetes, I ended up transferring schools, moving to Florida to go to Florida Atlantic University, where I met my now wife, and I've been living in Florida I lived in Florida for 13 years, and I just now moved back to Pennsylvania. So now let's kind of get behind the beaties, if you will. So as I stated, I just recently moved back to Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. I'm a father to a beautiful, almost 4-year-old girl, and a husband to an amazing wife. Back in 2009, I actually started my own digital marketing company. I still run that to this day. It is a social media and search engine optimization or SEO company. I've worked with a lot of companies in the pharmaceutical industry, but mostly small mom and pop shops and helping them out. So to kind of tell you a little bit more about me and to show you how these podcasts are going to flow in the future when there are guests and not just me talking to you, I'm going to ask just a bunch of random questions to people to kind of get to know them, but I'm also going to ask the same 8 to 10 questions to every single guest just to see what everybody's responses are. I mean, I just like to see what people have in common other than their diabetes. So I'm going to dive into some of these. So one of my biggest passions in life is sports. I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a Philadelphia sports fan. So I'm an Eagles fan. I am a Phillies fan. I used to be a Florida Panthers fan. Now I've kind of joined the bandwagon, and I am a Flyers fan. And I've always been an Orlando Magic fan, so they still mean a lot to me, but I have been kind of rooting for the Sixers since moving back to Pennsylvania. I know, bandwagon jumper, but it is what it is. So some of the other questions that I plan on asking people during the Behind the BDs podcast is, if you could master one skill in the very near future, what would it be? And for me, I think that would actually be getting my real estate license. It's something that I've always wanted to do. It's something that I've thought about, talked about. So I kind of want to go back to school because I miss school. I know that's weird. So I'm either thinking about maybe going to get my master's somewhere or to go get my real estate license. Another question that you may hear pop up on the podcast is, are you big into routines? And if so, what is your daily routine? I try to keep a daily routine, but I'm not very good at it. I know that some of the most successful people in the world have their daily routines. They stick to it, and that's why they're successful. So I do try to wake up at the same time every day. That hardly ever happens because I don't go to bed at the same time every single day. So they have a direct correlation with each other. But in the morning, I try to get my coffee, get my emails out of the way, and then start working and figuring out what I need to do for that day. So that is something that in 2019 I have written down to try to get better at, is to perfect my daily routine, to make things that become more of a habit instead of a hassle, and I just do them because I just know that I have to do them. Those are just a few of the questions that I will be asking on the Behind the BDs podcast. And to just kind of finish this up here, I just want to give a little bit more background of who I am and where this podcast idea came from. like I said at the very beginning, I've been blogging at the Life of a Diabetic for over a decade now. And throughout that time, I've met so many people. I've traveled to so many different meetups and social media summits and so many different events that put on by so many different organizations and companies. And I've just met some of the most incredible people. And what kind of when we're in those sessions, we talk about a lot of diabetes related things, but it's after those panels and those sessions when you really get to know people and you get to know what do they do for a living, what are their hobbies, what are their favorite books, and that's when you really become connected with people in your community on a much deeper level. And that's really what I wanted to do with this podcast. Since starting my blog over 10 years ago, there are so many more new people that I haven't met in person, but I've seen them on writing blogs or primarily on Instagram now, because there are so many more people on Instagram now. And I just want to share everybody's story with as many people as I can, but get behind the disease. So that's what Behind the BDs is going to be all about. New episodes will drop every single Wednesday. So that's it for the first episode of Behind the BDs. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. I really do hope that you come back for more. Next week, it will be on Wednesday, like I said, every Wednesday. For new episodes, you can always go to behindthebds.com, behindthebds.com, or you can subscribe to the podcast everywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Anchor, you name it. Wherever you listen to podcasts, the podcast is available. So I hope you tune in again next Wednesday when we look behind the BDs. Have a great day, everybody. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Well, when I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had so many questions. I didn't even know where to start. How do I record an episode? Where do I find background music? The biggest one was, how do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places that people like to listen to? Where do I find advertisers? Well, the answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing, and monetizing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and 100% ridiculously easy to use. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, go to anchor.fm/start to join me in the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.